Well, so yesterday we got ourselves introduced to this new system, the digestive system, and in that system, I first said that the structure of the entire system is like a tube. So as with any tubes, each tube do have at least two openings. For the digestive tract or the digestive tube, we are having the openings called the mouth and the anus. Mouth is the opening through which the food particles enter, and anus is the opening through which the remaining digested particles of food, that is known as feces, or more in the layman terms known as stool, gets out of the tube. Okay, now that was a oversimplified concept of this entire digestive system. I went on adding the further complications on this tube by drawing this diagram. And in this diagram, I showed that the tube is not having uniform diameter. As you might note that some parts of the tube are narrower, but other parts of the tube are wider. Okay, so this variations of the width of the tube is to be found along the entire length of the digestive tube. Now, the walls of the digestive tube, are not a solid one. It's made up of muscles, and being made up of muscles, the entire digestive tube is involved in a kind of a movement, and that movement is the peristaltic movement. That is the name, peristaltic movement. Now, what exactly is the peristaltic movement? For that, I think I have drawn this particular tube where I have compared the movement with the movement of the earthworm who is moving on the land. So as the earthworm moves, you probably have noticed that one part of the body of the earthworm becomes narrower or wider in relation to the remaining parts of the body. And a small portion just adjacent to that narrowed or the widened part, it shortens in the length. Okay, and after that shortening, once again, when it assumes back its own length, we say that the part has moved a bit. So similar kind of movement is also to be found in the digestive movement. The name of this movement is peristaltic movement, and the definition of the movement has been written here, that by alternate contraction and relaxation of the longitudinal and circular muscles of the tube. Now, how is the longitudinal muscle present? I have given you this particular both-sided arrow, which is actually representing a muscles present along the axial length of the tube, right? So this particular tube is causing the shortening. So this is where I have written the word shortening. And at the same time, there are another set of muscles that I've shown here. This, semicircular ones are representing the circular muscles. So with the contraction of the circular muscles, I have shown you on the side that this particular diagram was showing you that if muscular fibers are arranged in a circular orientation, in a circular orientation, then when individual fibers of this muscle would contract, in that case, there will be a narrowing. So this is the narrow tube, and this is the widened one. So by this way, the circular muscle is causing the narrowing of the tube, and the longitudinal muscle present here is causing the shortening of the entire tube. Okay, so that is how by alternate contraction and relaxation, you will have the entire peristaltic motions getting performed. Okay, so that was a short introduction. And after that, I explained that what is digestion, and that is explained on this part of the board, that it basically means the breakdown of food particles. So here it is written, breakdown of food particles. What kind of food particles? Which are relatively larger in size. So larger food particles are broken down to the smaller food particles. Okay, and how small or how large, that also I explained. That large means as much as can be as much as can the oral cavity accommodate, the cavity inside the mouth, as much as it can accommodate, you can take, right? And how much small? Small means small to that level which can be readily absorbed into the blood. So that exactly is written out here, which can be readily absorbed into the blood. So it should be so very small that it becomes very easily or readily absorbed into the blood. Okay, now for this breakdown, there are two methods involved. One is the physical method, another is the chemical method. Physical method means any kind of application of force to break down particles. And that force can come by the process of chewing. Okay, I mean, with the applications of your teeth or with the muscles present in the oral cavity, the physical method is thus employed to break down the food. Okay, so to break down the food, the physical method is in application area. Now there are chemical methods as well. Chemical methods means the biological I mean reactants getting converted to products. I mean breaking down into products by the help of something called enzymes. Okay, enzymes in Bengali is known as probably অনুঘটক, or the enzymes. The appropriate term for enzymes in Bengali would be উৎসেচক. Okay, so that Utsechok, what does it do? It converts the reactants into products, and the products are relatively of much smaller size and so very small that it can be easily absorbed into the blood. So here I have written the definition of a biological catalyst. What is that? Any agent which increases the speed of chemical reactions. That is what is written on the board. So this actually completes the short revision. And with that short revision, I think it's the time now to move further towards the completion of the other points that are present in the syllabus as topic. Okay, so can we now move forward? I'll be pausing the recording for recording process. Okay, so here we see the concept that this digestive tube is not having a uniform diameter. Some parts of the tube are wide, other parts of the tube are relatively narrow. So we will begin first with a very simple hand-drawn diagram of the digestive system for showing you an original diagram. So as I said, suppose this be a human being's face seen from the side. Okay, if this be a human being seen from the side. So here, what will be present is the oral cavity, the teeth and all that stuff. So here is the location for what? For the oral cavity. Okay, so food is going to enter out here. Now, after this face, what is present out here is the neck area. So I will drawing this neck area. Now, in this neck area, there is a part of the digestive tube. I think I have given you sometime before the idea of a pharynx. Did I ever give you that? Pharynx, that is the common space between the respiratory tract and the digestive tract. Did I ever give you that idea?
Yes, sir.
Pharynx. So continuing downwards from that pharynx is a tube that is a part of the digestive tract. This tube is present along the length of the neck, and it is even continuing along this entire height of the thorax. I think you know what is thorax? The chest, basically, right? So if we consider that this be the level of the end of the neck, so end of neck, if this be the level of the end of neck, in that case, the tube continues downward, stretches across the entire height of the thorax. And the thorax is separated from the abdomen by a muscular partition. Try to recall, there is a muscular partition that is called the diaphragm. I have said that concept to you before, right? Diaphragm. Now this tube pierces the diaphragm. This tube pierces the diaphragm, and soon after this piercing, this tube now enlarges into the shape of an English alphabet J. You know there is an English alphabet J. Does it not look something like this, J? So see, the shape of this enlargement is somewhat like J, and this enlargement, in English we call this as stomach. In Bengali you call this as pakasthali, and in the world of medicine we call this as gastrium. There is a hollow cavity inside this. We call that cavity as the gastric cavity. You might have heard the word before, gastritis. Gastritis, a very common word. People, when they suffer from acidity, belchings, sour belchings, they often say that they're suffering from gastritis. It is basically the inflammation of this part, the stomach. Okay. Now I have missed the name of this particular tube that is connecting the oral cavity with the gastrium. I'm specifically referring to this particular tube. So the name of this tube would be, there is only one name, which is universally used both in English as well as in the world of medicine. And that name is esophagus. This is one spelling. The spelling is the British spelling, and in American spelling, you simply call it as ESO. So what is it? It is basically the part of the digestive tube that conveys food from the oral cavity to the gastric cavity. I just explained what is gastric cavity and what is oral cavity. So the communication in between the oral cavity and the gastric cavity is the esophagus. Mainly, the movement that I have labeled here, the peristaltic movement, is to be found along this entire length of the tube. And the result of this movement is the food from the oral cavity is being carried downwards to the gastric cavity. Is the concept clear? What is esophagus? Okay, and there are many more minute details though, but as you already know, we do not have the provision to cover up all the minute details given the amount of time that are still left. Anyway, so this is the gastrium. Now what happens to this tube again? This tube now assumes a shape of the English alphabet C. You know, there is an English alphabet C. C for cat, C for Colombo. Okay. Yes. So similar to this shape of the English alphabet C, this tube now takes a sharp bend. And this part of the tube is known as duodenum. This is a very, very important part of the digestive tube because it is in this location that most, I should not use the word most, rather all the digestible foods do get digested in this part of the tube. আমরা যা খাই তাদের যে হজমের ক্রিয়া, সেই হজমের ক্রিয়া gets completed in this part of the tube. Which part? The name of the part is duodenum. Duodenum. Yeah, duodenum. Fine. So after the duodenum, this tube now takes a sharp upward bend, moves behind the gastrium, again takes a downward bend, and with this bending, the tube now enters into a system of coils. You know what is coils? Multiple coils are there. And this coil, you know, after dissection, these coils can be pulled out of the body and can be stretched as a single straight tube. Now, based on the histological differences, what is the meaning of this word histological differences? It means, suppose we take a small part of the tissue at this level. Which level? Suppose the level where I'm drawing this blue colored line. You take a small part of the tube. Similarly, you take a small part of the other area of this tube. Suppose this is the area for where we have taken a small part. If you compare the minute structure of these two parts, you will find a considerable difference. Understanding? এই দুটো অংশ যদি ভেতরে স্ট্রাকচারটা নিয়ে আমরা স্টাডি করি অনেকটা তফাৎ পাবো। And this tofat is indicative that this entire tube, though it looks like a single tube, but it is basically, you know, two parts of the same tube. And those two parts are known as, this is known as jejunum, and this is known as, I would like to draw your attention on the spelling of this particular word ileum. You have heard the word ileum before also, but that was in the study of the bones, iliac bone. Both are having almost the same pronunciation, but there is a difference in spelling. And that difference is in this particular third alphabet. That is, the ileum of the digestive tube is having E in the third place. But if the ileum of the skeletal system to have I in that. Correct? So now I have given you the names of three different parts of this tube, and these three different parts collectively are known as, they are collectively known as what? Small intestine. Bengali, there is a word called Khudrant. That in English is the, or in medical, this is the small intestine. Now, why it is known as small, I will come to that explanation soon after I complete describing or introducing the large intestine. With the end of this coil, temporarily, I'm now going to remove this label called small intestine so that I can show you the large intestine as well. See, with these coils, the coils at one point would obviously come to an end. And the end point, the tube is now suddenly swelled up. And that sudden swelling of the tube is known as cecum. C-A-E-C-U-M, cecum. And you might have heard a word called appendix. You might know people who have suffered from appendicitis, the kind of immense pain when you took the people to the physician complained that there might be an appendicitis and that needs to be operated on. So if that be the case, let me tell you here that the location of the appendix is somewhere from the base of the cecum. So whatever I have drawn here, this part, this small projection downward is known as appendix, or to be more specific and precise, it is known as wormiform appendix. Why it is known as wormiform? Because it looks like a worm. You have seen a worm, small worm, thread-like structure, right? You have never seen a worm, even if you consider earthworm, but broken into small parts. You have never seen worm. Okay. The medical word, you have seen worm. That's great. So the word for worms in medicine is vermis. And from the word vermis, we have the vermiform. That means the appendix having the shape of that worm. So this is the vermiform appendix. Done. Now, in this particular location, which location? The cecum. It is basically a junction between the ileum out here, and obviously I have written the cecum on the side. So the junction between the ileum and the cecum, named as the iliocecal junction. This iliocecal junction is the point which marks the end of the small intestine, as well as this same point marks the beginning of large intestine. Here. So the first part of the large intestine can be considered to be the cecum. Next, what happens? Similar kind of swellings of the tube are to be found now along the entire length. But this finding comes to a bend. If you notice this bend, a kind of flexion, bend. Notice it. I'm speaking of this particular area where the tube is now bent. And after bend, the tube would now move to the other side of the body. I think it would have been better if I could have shown you this entire large intestine in a separate color, so that you couldn't get confused when I show you the large intestine to be present over the small intestine. So see, with the green color, I have now chosen the green color to indicate the large intestine. Now you see the large intestine is undergoing a fold. I would call this as fold temporarily, but the technical word is flexure. Okay, I'll come to the technical word later on. Now what I'm trying to show is that after the large intestine crosses the side, after crossing, large intestine undergoes another fold. Now see, the second fold is out here. It was moving horizontally. After a length, it has again become a fold. So to notice this, this is the area of the fold. I'm calling this as a fold, but this technically is known as a flexure again. Did you notice or did you understand? This is the flexure. That also was a flexure. Which one on the other side? What you had? This one is also a flexure. So one flexure occurring on the right side. This is the right. The more appropriate term would be hepatic. Why hepatic? The word hepato refers to liver. I will come to that liver very shortly. Okay. Now, right hepatic flexure bends the large intestine from a vertical direction, from an upwardly proceeding vertical direction to a horizontal direction. So with that bend, the large intestine now stretches across the right to the left side. Did you understand? Hello? Please do confirm.
Yes, sir.
If you understood. So if this flexure, if this bend is known as hepatic flexure, that is the right flexure. Similarly, to indicate this flexure, we would have a name that is obviously the left. To represent left, I have just written LT dot. And here there is an organ called spleen. So the name of this flexure is SPLENIC. So the splenic is the name, but the name derives from the name of the organ, which is spleen. Okay. So with this left splenic flexure, the horizontally moving large intestine now undergoes again a bend downwards. And with that downward bending, it now proceeds further downwards. Okay. And at the end, it undergoes another very short flexure. And that very short flexure finally culminates into something called rectum in the midline of the body. It doesn't move to the other side, but rather it makes another bend to this dilated part of the tube. This dilated part of the tube is known as rectum. In Bengali, we call this as molashoy, where the stools are all stored. And that rectum finally narrows down to a small canal that is known as the anal canal. And at the end of the anal canal, there is the orifice, which is known as the anal orifice. So both the anal canal and the anal orifice taken together, we are having a term that is called anus. And just before the anus, the area of the organ which stores the stool is the rectum. Now see, I have shown you the entire digestive system, but I have not given you few names of the large intestine. Large intestine in the world of medicine is known as colon. And from this word colon,
Yes,
we have
sir.
a word called colitis. I think you know this term.
Yes, sir.
Okay, colitis. So this colon thus can be considered of to having around 3 to 4 parts. What are they? One part is stretching from the cecum to the hepatic flexure. Another part is stretching from the hepatic flexure to the splenic flexure. Another part is stretching from the splenic flexure to this particular fold doesn't have any specific name. But after the fold, whatever the stretch is present, we call this as sigmoid colon, because this particular stretch has roughly the shape of an English alphabet S. So it's roughly a shape something like this. So if you consider the shape, roughly it is having this S shape. So this is known as the sigmoid colon. Right. Now, then what are the names for the other parts of the colon? This part of the colon, which is actually a kind of an,
বলবো নামটা কালকে পড়েছি।
Okay, okay, yeah, tell me. বলো আশিক।
মানে যেটা স্টার্ট হচ্ছে
হ্যাঁ,
সেটা
secant থেকে
অ্যাসেন্ডিং কোলন।
ascending colon,
হ্যাঁ,
correct.
অ্যাসেন্ডিং কোলন। তারপর থেকে যেটা সেটা ট্রান্সভার্স কোলন।
Transverse colon, correct.
হ্যাঁ, আর যেটা নিচে ডাউন যাচ্ছে সেটা হচ্ছে ডিসেন্ডিং কোলন।
So this is the descending colon. So these are the 3 different parts of this entire tube called the colon: ascending, transverse, and descending. And this is how the entire digestive system structures and the parts are present. Okay, you can take the diagram of this whole Now I will come to some details about the different glands and the process of digestion. No, not in this current session, but in the renewed refresh session. By the way, let me pause the recording.